Hey guys, it's me Julie, and today's video is on taking criticism. First of all, let's get one thing straight. Criticism is a good thing. You want criticism. Because no matter what your background is, no matter how much experience you have, no matter how knowledgeable you are about your subject, how well read you are, you don't have the ability to be objective about your own work. So first of all, my advice on gathering criticism that you can use is to get a large test audience. You probably want a fair number of people to read it. These can be people that are acquaintances, people that are friends, people that are family, but you do want to get some of that audience to be not associated with you in a way that they're afraid to give you honest criticism. And you also want to really be focused on whether some of your test audience is part of the demographic that you're aiming at when you're writing, because those experiences that they have can be particularly relevant to your material. In addition to the large test audience idea, I strongly recommend, if at all possible, getting a critique partner who is also a writer. And that way, they'll be sending you their material, you'll be sending your material to them, and you'll both have a vested interest in giving really valuable, really dedicated, and really in-depth feedback to each other. You're going to have to learn how to give good criticism too if you find a critique partner. Think about the kinds of comments that have been useful to you in the past and that have really helped you with your perspective, and really try to dig in and give those kinds of comments to your critique partner. Now I have some advice on how to use and react to the criticism when you receive it. Now I've heard some writers say, a reader can't be wrong. Can they be wrong? Well, yeah, they can be wrong. But the very first thing you should always do when you receive a comment that you don't agree with or that you don't understand is go back to your material. Try to consider whether what they said is relevant and whether it is useful by first considering the possibility that maybe it is your fault. You should always have that as a possibility, because otherwise, why else are you soliciting feedback? So they may say something that your first reaction would be to defend your material and say, that's not right, you got it wrong, you read this wrong, you missed this, you misunderstood that. And if that's your first reaction, you might think about, well, if I have to give this person extra information about how to interpret my scene or how to interpret my dialogue or how to understand my setting that they didn't have, that they couldn't get from my material, can I incorporate that somehow? It could be something very subtle. But it is possible that they misread. It is possible that they overlooked something. And it is up to you as to whether you want to turn up some of those details or reinforce some of those pieces of your story so that you don't end up getting that kind of misunderstanding or that kind of comment again. A personal example for me would be, I have a book where the main two characters were laughing at each other's jokes, and the jokes weren't really very funny, but they were flirting with each other, and they were trying to impress each other, and they were also trying to flatter each other. So during this scene, they were kind of acting how people act in that situation. And I had a reader say, well, their jokes aren't funny, so why are they laughing so much? And of course, my first reaction is to say they're overdoing their reactions because they're flirting and that's how people act. But it occurs to me immediately that what I could do is try to make it more obvious that that's what's going on, try to make it more clear to the reader that these are not supposed to be stand-up comedian material type jokes. They are flirting with each other. So if I can reinforce that and maybe even make it clear that the main character thinks he's not being particularly funny and he's surprised that she's laughing, I won't have this reaction from readers where they're saying, she's just not writing funny jokes into her book and she thinks that we're going to laugh at them. So that's kind of the angle that you might take if you get criticism that you don't agree with. But after you consider the possibility that your material may need work, you should also consider the source. When you ask somebody to be part of your test audience, you're automatically putting them in this position of authority so that they feel like whatever they say is something that you have to listen to. But let's face it, lots of people don't know what they're talking about, and try to look like they do. So you always need to understand where that person is coming from. And as one personal example for me, I wrote a scene once where a girl was nervous talking to a guy she had a crush on. And my male reader replied to that by saying that I didn't do her nervousness correctly, that I needed to convey some sense of calmness and rightness, that she's found the one. And I thought that sounded contrary to everything I've ever heard about people meeting their guy that they have a crush on. So my first thought was to take that comment and ask a bunch of young women who were similar in age and situation to my main character, and I asked them, give me in 2 sentences, how do you feel when you see somebody you have a crush on? Tell me what's going through your mind. And nobody said, oh, I feel so calm and right. Everybody wrote about how it's nervousness and insecurity and whatnot. It matched what I had seen, what I had thought. And also, the reader, when I questioned him about his experience and why he believed he was qualified to advise me on how a young woman would feel, it turned out that he had never even had a girlfriend and certainly wasn't a girl. So I can look at that feedback and say, you know what, I think I can throw this out. You always have to consider whether the person is qualified to comment on your content. Every once in a while, they won't be. You'll also want to consider whether more than one reader is saying the same thing and give more weight to the comments that you're getting over and over again. For instance, let's say you're writing about a very small school in a small town, and it's based on your experience. You went to this small school, you know what they're like. But then everybody who reads it, who may be from bigger towns or maybe from places that have never seen a school like this, are thinking that your school is unrealistic. They may be confused as to what kind of place has a school like this. And if your first instinct is to react to that criticism by saying, it is based on something that I experienced, therefore it's right, what you're doing is you're kind of ignoring that most of the world won't have had the context to understand this as normal. And even if your characters are treating it like it's normal, which they should, you may be able to braid in some details to show that it's not just some kind of provincial perspective on your part or unawareness of the larger world on the part of you, the author. You may be able to put in a minor character like a teacher or maybe one of the students who comes from a place that may be more like your audience is likely to be from, and have them say 1 or 2 things or have narration suggest 1 or 2 times that they feel like a fish out of water in this tiny place. And that can help reinforce that, you know, this is not maybe a typical school if you ask everybody else. So doing that sort of thing can sort of help normalize, help understand for the readers that you're not portraying this is how schools are. That's just this school. So that sort of thing can sometimes help you if you're getting a whole bunch of the same kinds of comments, because you're not going to get primarily a readership that comes from your town. So if you want them to understand, if you want them not to have that reaction, you might have to do something about it, and that's really up to you. Overall, you're just going to have to remember that criticism is subjective. Even best-selling authors get terrible reviews of their books. There's a difference between a book that a reader just doesn't personally like and a book that is bad. The publishing industry is also full of subjectivity. So when you're starting to send out stories or books to agents or editors, you may find that some of the feedback that you get back indicates that the piece is not right for them, but you may have to read between the lines a little bit to find out whether they're saying that your book actually needs improvement or whether it's just not appropriate for what they're trying to find. Sometimes when you get professional feedback, you can see that they're saying that they just don't want a story like yours or a protagonist like yours, but then other times you can see that they're trying to say you need to firm up your dialogue or you need to make your character stronger. And sometimes if you take this feedback and you show it to your critique partner, they can help you clarify whether, this is off-base feedback or whether they felt that way, or whether you do need to go back to the drawing board. But just remember that unless you're writing purely for your own enjoyment and you never intend to share your stories with the world, criticism is important and you should care what they say. Criticism is ultimately going to make your stories better. And if that sounds like a worthy goal to you, then congratulations, you will probably go far.